How does it feel to be adopted? What does it mean to search for your origins? Adoption is a life-altering experience for everyone involved, but for adoptees, the question of identity is never simple. It's a lifelong journey shaped by mystery, longing, and sometimes profound discoveries. I've spent the last 8 years listening to over 250 adopted people from all walks of life and around the world who share their adoption stories. People who lived through, thrived, and merely survived adoption, many of whom dared to search for their biological roots. Some found long-lost family, others uncovered unexpected truths, still others found no answers at all. But all of them shared raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, identity, and self-discovery. Now, their voices come together in my new book, The Adoptee Experience. Inside the cover, you'll find what adoptees experience in their adoptive families, why so many of us feel compelled to search, and the deep emotions that drive us. How fantasies about birth parents shape our expectations before adoption reunion. The role of DNA testing, access to records, and other tools that impact adoptee searches, and the emotional roller coaster of attempting adoption reunions to reconcile the past, whether the journey brings joy, heartbreak, or something in between. The Adoptee Experience isn't just a book, it's a reflection of what it really means to be adopted. If you've ever wondered about your own identity, or you want to understand the adoptee journey, this book is for you. Please take a moment to visit whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience. Again, whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience to stay up to date on the book's progress.
My mind wasn't racing and wondering. I knew from whence I came. Finally, I knew who I could relate to. All of those things that had not related to before after finding out. I feel whole, I guess. I feel whole, even though sometimes I still don't feel like I belong 100%.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and you're about to meet Rosalyn, who spoke to me from the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. As a teenager, her adoptive mother's funeral was the scene of her late adoption discovery, rudely revealed. In reunion, Rosalyn said she found peace in the mirroring that she saw in her first mother and paternal family connections, but she refused to be an unaccepted secret with her birth father. Make sure you stay through the end, where Rosalyn reveals why her informal adoption is massively problematic for some of her basic freedoms. This is Rosalyn's journey. Rosalyn's adoptive parents were older when she entered their home from another family member's home at the age of 7 years old. Her adoptive father was 54, her adoptive mother was 37. When I asked what her life was like as a child in adoption, Rosalyn said,
Well, Damon, that's a huge question because I did not know that I was adopted till I was 15. And I found out at my adoptive mother's funeral when my dad's ex-wife, she was sitting a couple rows behind us and she says, "Oh, that poor girl, she's so upset and that's not even her mother."
Who said this?
My father's ex-wife.
Wow.
Yeah, so I turned around, I looked at her, and I looked at my dad. He heard it too. And when we got home, I just said to him, I said, "Daddy," and I called him Daddy for all of his life. You heard what she said. What does that mean? And he said to me, he says, "Baby, all I know is that you're mine." And I knew I could never broach that subject with him again. Because, I mean, in his face, and he's grieving his wife. I just knew that I didn't know if it was ever going to be a time. And then my adoption wasn't legal on top of it.
Well, let's pause for just
Okay,
a quick moment. Let's stay with your childhood. I don't
oh,
want to jump too far ahead.
good,
So
good.
you have lost your mom
Yep,
and you're 15, you're
yep.
sitting at the funeral and you overhear a comment that it sounds like was probably intended for you to
Oh,
hear.
definitely intended.
Ugh. And
De-
now you've attempted to broach the topic with your father, but it's a sensitive time. He's deep in his grief over his wife,
yes,
who, by the way, died very young.
yes.
And now you've both got this late discovery of yourself as an adoptee, but you can't talk to the subject with anybody that is close to you because it's this sensitive time. So, what was this like as a teenager dealing with this knowledge?
I was tormented, terrified. I was obsessed with just wanting to know what happened. And, you talked about my mother dying so young, and it was because she was an alcoholic. So, and my father was a saint of a man, but yeah, she was an alcoholic. And I did not come to live with them, Damon, until I was 7 years old. So I've had two very traumatic experiences because it stems back from, my birth mother and how they ended up with me. I lived with my aunt, who by all intents and purposes was my mother. I adored her. She was my everything, my aunt and my uncle, till I was 7 years old. I was always told that these other folks were my parents. That's your mom and dad. And I would go spend like weekends with them. But my mother at the time was working at May Company downtown Cleveland. And that was like a big deal for a Black woman at that time. And I guess she had a pretty good role there. But she was an alcoholic. And I remember when they came and got me, they came and picked me up. And my aunt opened the door, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And they said they were going to take me with them. And there was some words exchanged between the aunt and the aunt. And I was on the other side of the door. My aunt was just staring at me, and I'm staring at her. And tears filled in her eyes, and she closed the door. And then I went to live with my parents at that time. So I was like ripped, just ripped from them. And that was just hard. That was hard. I didn't understand what was going on.
So, as a 7 and younger person, you were living in your biological family, but with a genetic aunt.
No, not my biological family. My biological mother just gave me to them at the hospital. If I could tell you how, yeah.
Oh, so you were living with an adoptive aunt
Yes,
and who was sounds like the recipient of you as a child at the hospital.
yes,
And
oh,
then that aunt in the adopted family exchanged words with your adoptive mother,
yes,
and you were exchanged in the adoptive family from the adoptive aunt to your adoptive mother from 7 years plus.
exactly.
So you have been transitioned both in the hospital as an infant to this adoptive aunt, and then further transitioned, whom you said this aunt was your world up until 7 years old.
Yes,
Then you were transitioned again
yeah.
to your adoptive family. Wow, that is a lot.
It was a lot. And I, as a child, I always felt special. I always felt adored. I am so fortunate that they were the family that got me. I loved them so much, and they showed nothing but love for me. And it was weird, Damon, because I actually felt like among my cousins, I always thought that I was even more special because they treated me so well. My cousins felt that way too. They were kind of on the jealous side, but I was certainly the best kept secret because no one ever mentioned a word. None of the kids, probably my aunt would have killed him.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I didn't know.
So may I ask then, let's go back to the scene at the funeral.
But
So your father's ex-wife sort of vitriolically spilled this secret.
yeah,
I see. Got you.
and
Wow.
my aunt heard about it. She went ballistic. I got up. I had gone to the restroom because I just couldn't process everything. I was trying to process everything, and
Mhm.
followed me, and I told her what happened, and then all hell broke loose. But
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine.
yeah, it was not a good thing.
So then in your 15 years old plus time frame,
Mm.
what did you think about in terms of being adopted? Because it's you didn't even get to have that confirmational conversation with your father to hear him say the words.
Right.
It was just out there, but not truly confirmed. So what's going through your mind at that time?
Oh, I was so confused. And at that time, I mean, I was always naming the good girl. I was a great student. They always doted on me for that. But things started to fail in my head because I was like just obsessed with this. And I really didn't have anywhere to go or anybody to talk to. I did tell, I had three very close friends. And I did tell them, and everybody was like, wow. And it was still a secret, and it was our secret. And if I needed to talk about it, they were who I reached out to. We're still, friends today, except for one who passed away. But yeah, it was much later before I could, have those conversations. And it was really after my father passed away.
How were your conversations with your friends? Because I assume that they probably didn't have a whole lot of experience in adoption either. So what do teenagers talk about
Oh,
when you don't even know what you're talking about?
We oh, you know what? They helped me fantasize through this. They said, "Oh, she's probably this." One would say, "Oh, she's probably this," and "Oh, one day we're gonna meet her. Oh, when we get older, we're gonna go find her." They were very supportive.
Oh, so giving you some hope. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Wow, fairly fascinating. So I frequently focus on that teenage time of s- exploring your identity. You go to college or you get a job and stuff, and you start to really feel and understand who you are. Were there moments as you got to be an adult, maybe you're thinking about starting a family or something like that, where your unanswered questions about adoption came up a little bit more that sort of forced you to think them through?
Oh, yeah. Because after that, I started to feel like I didn't belong. I don't care how much they reinforced that they love me because I knew that they know at this point, but nobody's talking about it, and
Mhm.
certainly not with me. But and I knew that I never really looked like them. Things started to just tick, 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 tick in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, now I understand why that makes sense. Now I understand why dad is so old. He's older than actually my birth grandfather was. He was born in 1902.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, here, this man, which made me appreciate him even more. I'm like, as old as he is, he's dealing with this teenage girl, this child, all of this through all the years, and just doing everything that he could possibly do for me.
How did you get along with your adoptive mother and your adoptive father? Because I would imagine the alcoholism was very challenging to navigate.
It was extremely challenging, and I loved her, but that relationship was not good. When I was 10 years old, I snuck out of the house because I knew that she was at the neighborhood bar and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I did this to walk her home for three times before my father caught me. So, in that house, coming from where I was with my aunt, was pretty much hell. It was hell. There were a whole lot of things with her. And then I felt guilty, honestly, when she passed away because it seemed like my father and I were able to live and not worry. And I still carry that guilt today.
You do?
I do.
And what does that mean? What does it look like?
It looks like, though I know I couldn't help her, why was I like relieved when she was gone? I thought that, I don't know, it feels like a very mean feeling because I did love her. It felt selfish.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I can relate. And I think a lot of people can relate. So I don't, it's not uncommon. I'll tell you that when my adoptive mother, whom I absolutely adored, started to suffer mental illness,
Oh my.
our relationship turned to crap. It was just awful. But I had to remember in my mind and focus on it that this wasn't her. This was how her brain had flipped a switch. And I don't mean to be ignorant, but the sanity that was present previously had evaporated with the onset of Alzheimer's and the paranoid schizophrenia and all of these other things that were brewing in her brain. You could see the same person, but another character was in her brain now. And the reason I raise that is because, as you said, you loved her,
Hmm.
but she was very stressful. Same with my mom.
Wow.
And so the stress of dealing with all of the episodes that came from her mental illness were very taxing. And so while you love the person, you're very stressed out by what you're dealing with. And
Ab-
so I associate the guilt or my relief that she's no longer a challenge for me with the mental illness. And I would encourage you to definitely think of that you are focused on wishing that she had not forced you to endure the alcoholism, and you wish that she could just still be there with you as her sober full self. Do you see
ab-
what I mean? You have to kind of bifurcate the person into two
yeah,
different pieces.
that is so how I felt too, because on those sober moments with her, they were beautiful, but those were few and far between. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Damon.
Fresh out of college in 1979, Rosalyn married the love of her life. Sadly, he had just passed away recently when Rosalyn and I spoke, so the grief over her loss was still fresh. But she spoke fondly of the early days of their marriage when their son was born in 1981.
I was looking at him and thinking, oh my God, this baby I love so much. This is my first relative, my first blood relative that I know. And I couldn't imagine handing him over to anyone. I didn't even want anybody to change his diaper.
I know. You're like, you barely want to hand him to the nurse, let alone another parent.
Matter of fact, I made them keep him in. At that time, they wanted to take him back there and do whatever. I had them keep him in my room, and they were like, "Well, Mrs. Harris, you need to get some rest." I'm like, "I don't need rest. I need him." So I kept him in the room with me.
Wow.
My dad was still alive, so I still didn't think about it. It wasn't until I had my daughter, who I didn't have until 1990, and in between that, I had lost a child. So it became more for me. I lost a baby at 7 months.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For that, it was like, okay, I gotta have another baby. And
Mhm.
so I had my daughter in 1990, and I said, this is it. I gotta know. I gotta know where this woman is. I gotta know what happened. And my husband was there to support me every step of the way. There were times that he would say, look, we're still here. We all love you, because he saw how it was getting to me. But he never discouraged. He just always encouraged me to do whatever I needed to do.
That is really amazing. I'm so sorry for your losses, your husband and your child. But it's interesting to hear how supportive he was as he saw how much you clearly needed this.
Yes.
That comment that he made, "We're still here. Don't forget about us. We are
Right.
also important," but
Right.
also recognizing that probably he had something when he was growing up that was drastically different and uninterrupted
Right.
from your own experience. And so it's important for spouses, significant others, children, even adult children, to recognize your parent might need this, your spouse might need this.
Yes.
And this is a chapter. They're not trying to replace you for life. but they need to go on this research journey, and being supportive is incredibly impactful.
It's so much.
After her adoptive mother passed away, Rosalyn went through her mother's old papers, where she found a birth certificate from her adoption. You may have heard her say she wasn't legally adopted, the complications from which she'll get into later. Rosalyn told me a cousin of hers was working at the hospital where she was born, was dating one of the physicians, and was central to orchestrating her transfer to another family. The birth certificate she had found in her adoptive mother's papers had her adoptive parents' names on it, which she believes is an illegitimate document, one that she never saw again. Rosalyn's adoptive father passed away in 1987. Then her third child was born, a daughter, in 1990.
And it was really having her and having that whole experience of holding this baby again and wondering how someone could possibly relinquish someone when I loved her so very much, and both my children so very much. So I was full-fledged on at that point.
Yeah.
And they handed me this birth certificate, and I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was Rosalyn and I was Rosalyn Renee, but I was Rosalyn Renee Weatherall. And I'm like, okay. And it had mother, Joyce Alfreda Jones, which was fictitious. Joyce Alfreda was her name, but Weatherall was her last name. So I'm assuming, because I never had that conversation with her about my birth certificate, that she was trying to portray herself as being married and not an unwed mother. And she had the father's name as John Weatherall, who was fictitious as well. The thing with the birth certificate that gave everything away is there was an address. There's an address on it in Bay Village, which is a very prominent, exclusive, and especially at that time, white neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, how does this even fit?
Rosalyn's secretary and a woman she called a friend of hers at work at that time helped her through her search. Back then, there were various ways to find a person's phone number, and one trick was called a switchback, where you could look up an address to get a telephone number, so the secretary got a phone number for Rosalyn to dial. When she called, a woman answered, but when Rosalyn explained why she was calling, the woman said that she could not help her, but perhaps her mother-in-law could. So the woman said,
Let me get her for you. So here they still live there. She came to the phone. I told her who I was, what I was looking for, and she says, oh my God. She says, yes, your mother worked for me as a nanny. She cared for my twin boys when they were born. She was pregnant, but then she started to show, and she stayed here with us up until the time we took her to the hospital to have you. And she said, and I came to the hospital to visit you. And I told her if she wanted to come back and stay with us, that she could, but she didn't, she wouldn't. And she
wow.
heard from her since. So I just felt like God was just working for me. And this was a week after my birthday. This was a week after my 35th birthday.
Wow. Your birth mother had worked for her as a nanny. She
Yeah.
still lived in that home. So the address that your birth mother had put on the birth certificate was in this affluent neighborhood. It didn't make sense to you, but it
Oh,
was legit because it was a home at which she had worked.
yes.
And that family still worked there. So when you tracked back that address to a phone number and you called, the people still worked there. And she said, oh my gosh, I remember your birth mother. That is wild.
Yes. Very much.
Mm. And she had visited you in the hospital. That's really unreal.
And
So
she
what?
said to me, she says, if you find her, please, call me and let me know. I never did that. I never did. Never went,
Mhm.
but, you
Why
know.
not?
I really don't know, Damon. I thought about it a lot. I'm like, well, she asked me to do that for her, and she did something very big for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what stopped me, but I didn't. And I know she's long gone now.
Is she? Oh, that's too bad. Rosalyn contacted a family search group in Cleveland who set her up with a woman who could search for the last name Weatherall across the nation. Instead of working, Rosalyn and her secretary split the list and started making calls around the country. Her secretary shared Rosalyn's anxiety and anticipation for finding her birth mother. Call after call, the search yielded nothing until one day Rosalyn got a gentleman named Robert on the phone.
I'm talking to him and I'm telling him the story and who I'm looking for. And he says to me, I think you're my granddaughter. I said, okay, I'm at work. I got to maintain my composure. He told me, he says, yeah, my daughter left and she never told us where she was going. We didn't know where she went. She kept in touch, but yeah, I think you're my granddaughter. And just so happened I was. And he says, let me call you back. I'm going to call her. So he calls her and she calls me.
Wow.
And as the stars aligned, just so happened that she was living in Milwaukee at the time. And just so happened I was going to a conference in Chicago the next week. And Chicago and Milwaukee being so close. And when she told me she was in Milwaukee, I told her that. And she says, well, I'm going to come and get you. And she did.
Tell me about this before your meeting. You have spoken with her by phone. Now we're at the day of her coming to get you. What are you feeling on this day, anticipating meeting
Oh,
her?
God. Nervous and excited. I was so excited and so grateful. I just kept saying, thank you, God, thank you, God. Because I've been praying for this. And it was like just before my birthday, I had prayed so hard. I'm like, I can't go on like this. I can't endure this pain, this feeling that I have any longer. I was like, God, please help me. And like I said, a week after, like all of these things exploded and started to come together. So I don't know. It was at the airport. She picked me up at the airport and we embraced. And I looked at her and I'm like, okay, she's beautiful. And here's someone I actually look like. I looked like her. She was 5'10", striking. I'm
Mhm.
5'6". So I'm like, I don't know what happened there. And I don't know. She was very guarded, though. She cried, we embraced, but she was very guarded. Like she didn't know how to really have a conversation with me.
Yeah. You're like the most intimate stranger she could ever meet,
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely.
right? It's crazy. You should theoretically be able to open up and talk about everything under the sun, but the circumstances of your relationship decades later meeting puts a huge strain on that ability to connect in that way. And
Yeah,
presumably also the circumstances through which she found herself pregnant, making the decision to place you with someone else. And I always remind folks, when we return to a birth parent, that return also is a rewind for that parent back to that time. If you have, I'm sure there have been, several things in your past that you have lived through, endured, and they're behind you now. And if one of those things came forward again, your brain would go back to that time. And that's what happens in these adoption reunions. And so I'm sure it was incredibly difficult. Huge admiration to her for showing up to the airport to pick you up.
oh,
That's incredible. But
yes.
yeah, I could see how it'd be incredibly challenging to make a connection with you. So how did it go?
Well, the car ride because I still was flying into Chicago, but it was over the weekend, and I was going to spend the weekend with her. So the car ride from Chicago to Milwaukee was pretty much quiet, just small talk. We get to her house and I started to ask her a few questions. She answered me, but was very straightforward. There was no real emotion in her questions. She never had another birth child, but she fostered 5 children. That says something to me. And she was amazing. She was an amazing woman.
What does that tell you?
Well, I don't know if what it told me is true, but it made me feel like she couldn't replace me. And she really didn't want to replace me, but she wanted to give back because somebody else was giving to me. I don't know, but that's kind of how I felt.
Rosalyn stayed in her birth mother's home. It was a nice time as the woman would get up and make breakfast every day, but she remained somewhat quiet and guarded. On the day of Rosalyn's departure to return to Chicago for her business trip, her birth mother invited the children she had formerly fostered over to meet Rosalyn. Years later, Rosalyn learned from one of them that her birth mother had never revealed their maternal relation.
She told us that you were this child that she really bonded with when she was in college and she just took care of you. She never told us at that time that you were her child. She had one that was in the home at the time. The others had all moved out and moved on, but one was still there. And one of her foster children had a child who was her grandchild. And she came and she was very close to this girl. And everybody had said how close she was to this girl. And later they started to say, oh, yeah, she was trying to then replace you with her kind of thing. But I don't know.
I see.
But it was the last day there that I just came out and asked her. I said, could you tell me who my father is? And she says, oh, yeah. She didn't offer any information, nothing.
Wow.
She was not going to give it. So she gave me his name and she says, and one of my friends who knows him and is still in touch with him. So they gave me his phone number.
Wow. So what happens next?
I get back to Cleveland after the conference and I'm so nervous. And I'm telling my husband, I want to call. He says, make that call. Call him. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can do this. But I did. And so I told him the story and he's like, what?
Eh,
He's like, oh gosh, yeah. So he says, oh yeah, I know your mother. I remember that. And then he started to proceed to tell me like when I was conceived. I'm like, what? I didn't want to hear any of that.
yeah.
Yeah. So he says, I'm gonna call you back. And he had a twin sister that lived in Michigan, in Detroit. He calls her. So she calls me and she says, you're coming here. I want you to come here this weekend. And it was like a Thursday or something. So it would have been the next day. And I'm like, I don't know if we can do that. And my husband's like, we'll be there.
Ah,
And I'm like, okay. So we packed up the kids and we drove to Detroit and we stayed at my aunt's house. She had my cousins there and their families and my cousins who are my sisters today. They
really?
everything to me as well. So she was the catalyst to just getting me with the rest of the family. And she had a daughter who was like 14 or so at the time, who is now a brain surgeon. So proud.
Mm,
But it was amazing, except for the fact that my father and I are not in touch because his wife was not accepting of the relationship. He tried. And the last time he had come to meet me in Michigan, when he got back home, she had moved the furniture out of the house. And I'm like, I can't do that.
oh,
He
wow.
called me, he would say, I'm up at the corner. I'm calling you from here. And I'm like, look, I'm not the secret. I'm tired of being the secret. If you can't openly have a relationship with me, then I don't think this is going to work. And then the last time I had actually called him before we had that conversation, she answered the phone. And Damon, I was crushed. She was so nasty to me. She was, you and your mother can have this house and come and get whatever you want. And I don't believe you're as old as you say you are. And I mean, just really,
Mm.
it was awful. I hung up the phone and I'm like, okay, if I wasn't who I am, I would have said a whole lot more. I've always been taught to be respectful of my elders. And so I just hung up and cried it out.
Dang, I'm really sorry to hear that. It's so rough when you get the connection to the birth parent you're looking for, but their spouse is not able to get past water under the bridge in history. It's really, really sad to see because for the adoptee, yo, I didn't ask to come here. I didn't set this up. This was not my doing. And whatever happened in the past, especially if it was prior to your relationship with your husband, like
Yes.
let's get over this. You know what I'm saying? But what it sounds like to me is they had a deeper challenge in their relationship that
Yes.
she was bringing forward to your emergence.
Absolutely.
That kind of behavior is indicative of a deeper issue, in my opinion.
You hit the nail on the head because from later, when my cousins would tell me, "Oh, but she's such a sweet person," but then some would say, "Oh, but he's a challenge." He was challenging with her. So I got to give her that. And you don't want to come, I didn't want to disrupt their lives. The sad part about that is he has four sons, a set of twin boys. And so I have half brothers, half siblings that I could never have a relationship with because they were not going to be against their mother. I did meet a couple of them by chance. When my father came to Michigan, he brought them with him. So I did meet them, and they were very nice to me.
Mhm.
But I knew that we weren't going to have a relationship.
But can we go back for a moment though, because I didn't get to hear the story of you meeting your birth father for the first time. So tell me about this, the lead up to you guys deciding that you are going to connect face to face, and what was your feeling going into that meeting? How did that get set up?
Oh, I didn't set it up. That aunt, his sister, and my cousins all did that. And they just told me, "Why don't you come down this weekend? We're going to do this, that, and the other." And I'm like, okay. So my husband's, he was always ready to go anywhere. Get in the car, let's go. If he knew anything about it, we were going.
I love it.
But we got there. Then we were going to go over my one cousin, my other aunt, go over her mother's house. And we get there, and he was in the kitchen. I didn't know he was there. I didn't know I was gonna meet him, so it was a surprise.
Wow.
So he comes out of the kitchen and they're all like big-eyed and they're like, "There's your dad." And he embraced me with the biggest hug and we both bawled. I was just crying. My cousins have pictures of that.
That's unreal. He cried too, huh?
Tried to.
Mm. He didn't know that you had been conceived, it sounded like.
He said he did not. He said he did not. He said, "She didn't tell me," but she said that she did.
Uh-huh.
She said that he did, she did, and when she did, he went and enlisted in the service.
Oh, interesting. So it sounds like he, at least in the aftermath of your reunion, tried to make things work. He was trying to be a good dude, but unfortunately, his marital situation was not allowing for you all to continue. And I really appreciate what you said, this notion that you've been a secret long enough.
Yeah,
It's a thing that leaves you fed up.
yep,
I don't need
exactly.
to do this anymore. I'm an adult and I'm not going to be your secret. So I can appreciate where you were coming from. Rosalyn's birth mother passed away in May of 2024. Despite being sick with cancer, her husband rode with Rosalyn as their son drove the couple to her birth mother's funeral. Unfortunately, Rosalyn's husband passed away in December of that same year. After we acknowledged what a heavy year it had been for her, I asked about Rosalyn's relationship with her birth mother post-reunion. She said that 1 week after they met, for the first time, her birth mother had a massive stroke that changed her physical capabilities, but hadn't impacted her mentally. She still called Rosalyn weekly, but the calls were short. Her birth mother was a woman of few words, and Rosalyn was sensitive to raising the issue of the circumstances for her relinquishment, so she held back from probing further. Having no relationship with her birth father, and since her birth mother had passed on, I was curious about Rosalyn's reflections on her adoption reunions and what she had gotten from the journey.
Peace, peace, where my mind wasn't racing and wondering. I knew from whence I came. Finally, I knew who I could relate to. Oh, yeah, I look like her. All of those things that had not related to before after finding out. Then I joined both families, my adoptive family, my biological family. Everybody knows each other. I feel whole, I guess. I feel whole. even though sometimes I still don't feel like I belong 100% though, because
Mm,
I didn't grow up with my cousins as much as they love me. And when they start to talk about things in the past, I'm like, I can't relate to that. I wasn't there with you guys. You
yeah,
know, they're our grandmother this and our that. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, I can't relate.
there's lost history. Yeah. But you know what? While it's sad to have that lost history, you also get to, for lack of better words, be a student of that history,
Right,
right? You get to ask questions and have them tell you the stories, and you get to hear some of the banter of them going back and forth where the story is incongruent with what one person said versus another. No, 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 that's
yeah,
not what happened, right? So it
yeah,
can still be entertaining. There's a sadness for not having lived the experience, but there's also a reverence for the fact that you get to even ask.
right.
So,
And I learned a lot. I've
mhm,
learned a lot. And oh my gosh, I got a barrage of pictures from my mother, I got a barrage of pictures from my biological dad's family. So
that's
I look
great.
at those and those are good. It's all good. It's
That's
all
amazing. Now, let's go all the way back for a moment because this is important. Remember, I said Rosalyn suspected that her adoption documents were illegitimate based on the story of her cousin working in the hospital and facilitating her transition to a new family. If you live in the United States, you should be familiar with the requirement to have what's called a real ID as the new baseline for documented identification for travel. A real ID is a driver's license or state identification card that meets minimum federal security standards set by the Real ID Act of 2005. Beginning in May 2025, the requirement is that individuals have physical or digital identity documents for various official purposes, including boarding commercial flights and accessing federal buildings. To get a real ID, you have to visit your state's Department of Motor Vehicles in person with documents proving your identity, social security number, and residency. You're about to hear how Rosalyn's unofficial adoption has left her grounded from air travel.
I attempted to go to the BMV to get a real ID, had all my paperwork, but nothing matched as far as who I am and who I've lived as all my life. And they sent me away. The guy was really nice. He said, I'm so sorry, ma'am, because he could tell how upset I was. I cried all the way home. And I told my husband and my kids, I'm like, this is crazy. But they told me that the best thing we can tell you to do is try to get a passport. And I'm like, okay. So I gathered all the papers, submitted the request for a passport, expedited it, spent almost $200 with the expedited fee. Comes back, I'm denied.
And this is because your adoption was not legally executed.
Yes,
So you can't fly, you can't travel, you can't get a real ID
right.
because your adoption is not formal nor legalized. And you are, as I understood it, older than me.
Yeah,
So you are clearly an established adult in this society.
I'm 68 years old. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? I'm going to have to get a lawyer. But that's how I found you because I'm just Googling things on who can I talk to about this. And for whatever reason, you popped up with this podcast. And And I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to that. I didn't even know these things existed. And then I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm crying and I'm relating. And so that's how I found you. But yeah,
Wow.
an illegal alien. I can't fly. But I did finally contact a lawyer. So I'm going to go from there and see what I can do.
That is unbelievable that you could be born and raised in this country, have
Mm,
lived out an entire legal life that
right.
you didn't create, yet you're not able to do one of the most basic things that people who are born in this country can do, which is travel within the country.
Exactly.
So wait a minute though. Let me ask you this. What does that then mean for your driver's license?
I was able to get just a regular driver's license but I think eventually you have to have the real ID. So I think when I go to renew it, if I can't get the real ID, I don't know what's going to happen.
So because your birth certificate and related documents are
Yes.
all mismatched, none of
Yes.
them have consistent information about you as a person,
Right.
you're not able to get the federal government to recognize you for a real ID. That is unreal. I'm sorry. That's crazy.
And they can't give me answers. I'm like, oh my goodness, how could this be? And it goes back to that kind of fake birth certificate I told you about. I'm like, that must be how they got me in school, because I'm in school, and all through school, I've gotten my undergrad, I've gotten my master's. I'm a citizen, and I can't get on a flight.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Oh, Rosalyn, I'm so sorry. I hope you'll reach back to me and let me know how this plays out.
I will.
And I would encourage you to look online for additional adoption related resources on this. There's a guy who comes to mind. His name is Greg Luce. And Greg is a lawyer, and he runs a website, adopteerightslaw.com. His website goes into the laws around adoption state by state.
Okay.
And I can't help thinking that because he and people like him are paying attention to adoption advocacy laws around the country, that they may have heard of stories like yours before and have ideas for what you might execute to get around this hurdle for you to travel even domestically. I think reaching out to them would be a good idea for you in
Oh,
this situation.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Thank you so much for making
Yeah.
time to be here with me. This is really great. I'm glad we finally connected. I know you had a rough year, but it sounds like things have smoothed out, at least for now. And I'm so glad that you said you got peace out of your adoption reunion journey. That is a huge factor, is not just having the courage to embark on the journey, but actually getting something that you're hoping for out of it. And it sounds like you did.
I'm so loved, and I'm so blessed, and I'm so grateful. And I'm so thankful to you for letting me be on your platform and share my story. It means so much, Damon. It's such a pleasure.
Excellent. I'm so glad to be able to do it. And thank you for trusting me, for helping you share your story, Rosalyn. You take care. All the best. Hey, it's me. Rosalyn talked about how tumultuous her beginnings were, moving from family to family at 7 years old, living with a mother suffering from addiction, which put pressure on their family. I admit, I felt some anger and irritation for her dad's ex-wife's vicious reveal of her adoption at Rosalyn's adoptive mother's funeral. That was a cold thing to do, and if she had a problem with her ex-husband, she should have taken things up with him directly instead of exposing something sensitive in an underhanded way to a child. I loved hearing that Rosalyn's birth mother picked her up and invited her into her home, even if it was tough to confront the past. And it was sad to hear that Rosalyn's birth father's wife was unable to allow their connection, presumably because of historical events in their home. Rosalyn now faces the same challenges some international adoptees face, not being recognized as a documented citizen in the United States. But unlike some international adoptees whose official documentation was botched when they were brought to the US, Rosalyn's documents were falsified, creating roadblocks to her even getting a plane ticket nearly 70 years later. If you have legal issues surrounding your adoption, including birth records and citizenship, I encourage you to visit adopteerightslaw.com. Greg Luce has accumulated a wealth of knowledge after years of adoptee advocacy. He might guide you to seek an attorney in your state who is well versed in local laws and statutes that will impact the outcome of your case. But if you believe in the fight, the time and energy to achieve your goal will be worth it. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you found something in Rosalyn's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really?